Welcome. So we are now going to sketch some square root graphs. So let's begin by sketching this one before us. What we're going to first look at is the different components that it has. So we've got this 6 out the front, and what is this 6 out the front doing, or what is it telling us? It's telling us that there is a dilation by a factor of 6. So there's a dilation happening there. What is this -2 telling us? It's important that we read the negative in front of it. That's telling us that we've got a translation, and because it's outside of the square root, it's telling us that it's an up or down, and because it's a negative, it's a down translation. That means we already know generally what this graph is going to look like. In our heads, the way that we should be thinking about this is, well, what does a general square root graph looks like? It looks like this. Y is equal to the square root of x. Then we've got a dilation. Now, this dilation is going to cause the graph to be stretched, but I actually don't want you to worry about drawing that stretching. Only thing that you really need to worry about is making sure that you get your x and y intercepts correct. The dilation will affect your x and y intercept, and that's how you're going to show that you've drawn it correctly. Don't actually worry about drawing the stretching. Then what we do have to worry about is this -2 down. So we've got that 6 there, and now we have to make it -2 down. So that means what we're going to do is we're going to take the graph, and I'm going to move it 2 down. Just like that. So now, what do we have? We have our end point here. This is our end point. And if I've moved it 2 down and I started at 0, 0, it's clearly just going to be 0, -2. And that also is working as my y-intercept as well. But I also need to figure out what my x-intercept is going to be. So how am I going to figure out what my x-intercept is going to be? Well, to find your x-intercept, we're going to let y equal 0. It's important that you're working out as nice and structured. So writing something like that at the very beginning always is helpful. I'm going to put 0 there. It's going to be 6, the square root of x minus 2. Then I'll plus 2 to both sides. I'll then divide both sides by 6 to get rid of this 6 here. 2 divided by 6 is just going to be 1/3. The next thing that I need to do is I need to get rid of the square root, because remember, I want to get the x by itself. To get rid of the square root, you're going to square both sides. When you're squaring both sides, what you're doing is you're squaring the numerator and you're squaring the denominator for this fraction here. And this now just becomes x. So that means x is going to be 1/9. And that, everyone, is my x-intercept. So now I can come to my graph, and I come to this point right here. This is going to be 1/9, 0. Just like that. If I wanted to, I could figure out what my y-intercept is as well. I mean, we already know it, but let's just do it anyway. What is my y-intercept going to be? Well, if I let my x be equal to 0, this is just going to, the whole thing here is just going to be 0, isn't it? Because the square root of 0 is 0, and 0 times 6 is 0. So it's just going to be 0 minus 2. So it means I've got y is equal to -2. And as you can see, that's what we saw there. So no big surprises. That was our end point as well. That was our end point. So I'm just going to write here, this is also our end point. Perfect. So we have drawn everything. Let's make sure to put an arrow there to show that it's going on forever. And now let's move on to our next one. Now our next one is an interesting one because there's a reflection here that we have not yet seen before. Do you see how I've got a negative inside the square root? I've got a negative inside the square root. Well, what is that causing? A negative inside the square root, and I'm going to write this here, is causing a reflection, but it's a reflection across the y-axis. So if I was to come over here and just show you what I mean, if I was to draw a pair of axes, and then I can have on one side this is y is equal to the square root of x, and then on the other side, I'm going to draw a graph that looks like this. This is y is equal to the square root of -x. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, I thought you couldn't square root a negative number. But let's see what happens when I sub in negative numbers into this rule. So I'm starting with y is equal to the square root of -x. If I was to put in -2 into this, actually, let's pick a nicer number. Let's pick a square number. Let's put in -4. This is going to be a negative, and a negative becomes a positive. So it's going to become the square root of 4. Do you see how the two negatives created a positive? and now this just becomes 2. So that means when I subbed in -4, I got 2 out. So -4 gave me 2 out. Just as if I was to sub 4 into this graph, if I was to sub 4 into here, I would also get 2 out. 4, 2. Also, let's appreciate for this red graph over here, if I was to put in a positive number, what would happen? Well, if I was to put in, I don't know, let's just put in 4. So not -4, let's just put 4 in there. Well, that's going to leave me with y is the square root of -4. That doesn't work, does not work. You can't square root a negative. Try put it into your calculator, it will just say error. And that's why we don't have a negative, anything in the positive region here, because you can only put in negatives into this for it to make sense. Or in other words, as you can see here, you're just drawing it reflected across the y-axis. So that's what's happening here. We've reflected it across the y-axis. So that means when we come to draw this now, we've got this reflection going on, and it's moved up 5 spaces. So it's up here now. So this 5 is causing a translation up. This 3 here is causing a dilation, but as I said, you don't actually have to worry that much about dilations. Let's label this point right here. This is going to be the point 0, 5. And we don't have to worry about drawing this part. Do not draw that part. So only this up here, because the negative is here, not out there. Perfect. That is our graph right there. Let's keep on moving. Let's keep on moving. Well, now we've got these graphs here. This has a negative out the front, and we know that when we have a negative out the front, I'm going to write in here, it's going to cause a reflection, and this is one we've seen before, it's a reflection in x-axis. So that means it's not looking like this, instead it's looking like that. And then we've got a -2, so that means we're going to move it 2 down. So it's going to look like that. This is going to be the point 0, -2. So reflection in the x-axis there, and then we've got a translation down. We don't have to worry about finding any x-intercepts, because we know, based on how it looks, that it's not going to have any. And that's the same thing over here. We knew it's not going to have any x-intercepts because of just how it looks. Okay, let's come to this one here. This one's trying to confuse us, because we've got, if we start with our normal graph here, we've got a negative on the outside. Let me grab another color. That's causing a reflection in the x-axis. Then we've got a negative on the inside. That's causing a reflection in the y-axis. So it's actually going to be over there. So if I was to now rub that all out, we've got a graph that looks like this. But then it's been moved 2 up. So we're going to take it and we're going to move it up here. And that is what my graph is going to look like. We could then find my x and y intercepts. I mean, we already know that this is going to be 0, 2 because it's moved 2 up, but we also need to figure out what the x-intercept is going to be. So what is the x-int going to be? We let y equal 0. That means we're going to get 0 is equal to negative the square root of negative x plus 2. We minus 2 from both sides to get this. I then would want to get rid of the negative on the outside here. So I would divide both sides by -1 to get rid of this negative. And a negative and a negative is a positive. So that is now this. I would then square root both sides. So I'm going to get 4 is equal to negative x. And then I would divide by a negative again. So that means I'm going to get x is equal to negative 4. So this point right here is going to be negative 4, 0. Really important that you feel comfortable with all this algebraic manipulation going on here. These are core skills of methods. If you wanted to figure out what the y-intercept is going to be, you could, but we already can see it, what it is there. We're just going to go y is equal to negative the square root of negative. We put a 0 into that spot. That all goes to a 0. 0 plus 2 is equal to, drumroll, 2. And that is it, everyone. We have found our x and y intercepts. So there and there. We've graphed it, we've put in coordinates, everything looks great. That is some basic sketching. Hopefully you found this part of the video helpful. In the next part, we'll go through some more complicated sketching. I'll see you then.